Welcome to the final installment in the Salmon Aquaculture video series, Harvesting and Processing. In this video, we will examine the last phase of the farm salmonid production cycle as we follow through the harvest preparations, the loading of the live haul transport boat, the offload and stun and bleed, and finally the processing and boxing of the finished product for markets throughout North America and the Pacific Rim. As the farm salmon reach their targeted weight, they are scheduled for harvest. The harvest population is put on a starvation regime for approximately 7 to 10 days prior to the anticipated harvest date. This short starvation period is conducted to A. Clear the digestive tract of food and feces, B. Reduce the activity of digestive enzymes, and C. Allow the fish to better cope with the stress of harvest. These precautions result in a better quality product for market. In the following segment, we will observe the harvesting process for a live haul transport. Atlantic salmon are generally transported to the processing facility for stunning and bleeding. Due to their lower stress tolerance, Chinook salmon are usually stunned and bled on the vessel at the harvest site and are transported dead in slush ice to the processing plant. The process is essentially the same with the exception of the location of the stun and bleed facility and the rigging of the harvest boat for live or dead haul transport. In this segment, we will examine a detailed overview of a typical harvest seining process. Here you can observe the crew lay out the seine net in preparation for setting the seine that will be used to segregate and capture either a portion or all of the fish for harvest. A seine net is a large rectangular net with a cork line on top and a heavy lead line on the bottom. In this case, the crew is also using an additional floating cork line behind the seine net. You will see how this is used a little later. In these first steps, the lead line of the seine net is draped over the floating cork line. The remainder of the seine net is tossed into the water until the full depth of the seine is deployed in the pen and the lead line has reached the bottom. You will notice that this harvest is occurring at night. This is quite common as it is often done to ensure that the fish arrive at the processing plant first thing in the morning. The crew then retrieves the control ropes attached at the corners of the lead line and pulls the lead line along the bottom of the net until it reaches the opposite side corner of the pen. Once the lead line is in place in the bottom corner, it is pulled up to the surface using the corner control ropes. This can be heavy work that requires solid footing and safe lifting techniques. The raised bottom corners of the seine lead line are secured to the corner stanchions of the pen. After the corners are secured, the side panels of the seine are raised and secured to the side stanchions of the pen. At this point, the control rope on the midline is utilized to raise the center of the lead line. The remaining lead line is then brought to the surface along the full length of the pen, trapping the fish on all sides in the bag or pocket created. Once the seine net has been secured, weights are deployed into the seine to create a deeper pocket adjacent to the harvest vessel. The control ropes for the floating cork line behind the seine are then threaded around the sides of the pen. Note that the fish you see in the seine are not agitated but are calmly schooling. This is important as undue stress on the fish at this point must be avoided. The back of the seine net is adjusted and shallowed to take up any excess netting. The sides of the seine are also adjusted to remove any folds and to allow the floating cork line to pass through smoothly. After the cork line has been installed around the seine, final adjustments to the seine are made in preparation to pulling the cork line. Once the net is properly shallowed, the cork line can be pulled under the seine to create the desired pocket for loading on the side of the pen adjacent to the harvest vessel. Again, you will note that the fish in the corked pocket are not agitated, but milling around calmly. It is important to minimize stress and crowding of the fish during the seining process. Excessive crowding or stress at this stage can result in external or internal damage to the fish and will result in a poorer quality product with a lower selling price. Careful handling of the fish during harvesting ensures the years of good husbandry are not lost in the final hours. The final result of the seining process is a narrow, deep pocket containing the fish that will provide easy access to the brailer during loading onto the harvest vessel, as you will see next. The fish are generally loaded onto the harvest boat using a power brailer as shown here. The brailer is a net bag with vinyl sides designed to retain the fish in water to minimize damage. The brailer is maneuvered through the seine pocket to gently capture the fish in the brailer. The brailer is then lifted up to the harvest vessel and released gently onto a table above the holds. As the brail is released, the fish slide into the waiting holds. The fish are often counted at this point as they slide down the chute into the holds of the boat. It is important that the harvest vessel track the number of fish loaded into each hold to ensure that maximum loading densities are not exceeded and oxygen levels can be properly maintained. The oxygen levels are carefully adjusted during loading and transport to provide optimum levels for the fish in the holds. This process continues until the desired numbers of fish are loaded. As the fish are removed from the seine, you will note the crew member in the upper left corner of your screen adjusting the cork line to tighten the pocket. Commonly referred to as crowding, this is necessary to ensure that the brailer captures as many fish as possible in order to minimize loading time. Once the target number of fish have been loaded, the boat departs and travels to the processing plant for offloading. The live transport of the fish to the processing plant may take many hours depending on the distance between the farm and the processing plant. Transports of 8 hours or more are not uncommon. During the transport, the oxygen levels within the fish holds are constantly monitored by the fish technician to ensure the fish arrive in optimum condition. Upon arrival at the processing dock, the holds are readied for offloading. Again, a brailer is used to move the fish in much the same way as they were loaded. The brailer is maneuvered to the dock and released onto a dewatering table that directs the fish into the stun tank. During this process, the harvest fish are chilled with ice in the stun tank and sedated using clove oil or carbon dioxide in preparation for bleeding. The anesthetized fish are then tipped out of the stun tank onto the bleeding line. Bleeding the fish is an essential step in the harvesting process. A properly bled fish is a fresher product that does not discolor the ice in the box or tote and has an extended shelf life of up to 10 days. Bleeding is accomplished using a single cut through all 4 gill arches on one side of the gills only. The fish are then directed into totes of slush ice where they will bleed out in preparation for processing. Offloading of the harvest boat continues. As the fish are removed from the holds, the water in the holds is pumped down to ensure the brailer can get a full brail of fish. It is important to get the fish offloaded quickly and with the minimum amount of stress possible. The oxygen is monitored regularly to ensure oxygen levels remain adequate. Here you can see the oxygen stones or diffusers in an empty hold. The last few brails of fish in each hold often have to be done with a man in the hold directing the brailer to empty the hold, as you can see here. The offload and stun and bleed process for a 35,000-pound harvest can take 2 to 4 hours. The fish are bled and chilled in the totes for 30 minutes or more before they are ready for the processing plant. In the following segment, you will see the processing of the fish for market. In this particular case, the processing plant is within a few hundred yards of the dock, allowing for easy transport of the totes into the plant by forklift. The totes are moved into the plant and are tipped onto the primary processing line. Each tote contains approximately 800 pounds of fish. These fish are Atlantic salmon, averaging over 13 pounds. The fish travel down the processing line through specific cleaning processes. First, they are split from the vent to the throat and the guts are removed. Here, the bloodline or kidney is cut in preparation for the next phase of the cleaning process. The gut cavity is thoroughly washed and cleaned to remove all of the residual blood and membranes from the gut cavity. This process utilizes several different tools, including spoons, pressurized water, and combination tools that use water and vacuums for suction. The flow of fish along the line must be maintained to process the load as quickly and as efficiently as possible. A good processing line can process a 35,000-pound load in several hours. After the fish has been thoroughly cleaned, it is put through a final wash before moving to the next phase of the process. Here, the cleaned fish are moved into slush ice totes for chilling. It is very important that the fish are chilled down during processing. Air is bubbled into the totes to circulate the water in the totes to speed up the chilling process. Remember that fish are cold-blooded and are the same temperature as the ocean environment, which in BC coastal waters is generally between 7 to 12 degrees Celsius. The core temperature of the fish must now be brought down to below 2 degrees in preparation for grading and boxing. Once sufficiently chilled, the salmon are moved onto the grading line, where they are examined and sorted for quality according to the following grades. Farmed salmon quality grades: Premium, Standard, and Utility. Most farmed fish processed in BC achieve greater than 85% premium grade. Standard grade fish account for the next largest percentage and generally have small imperfections that make them well suited for filleting and other value-added programs. Each fish is examined for irregularities. Premium fish may only have minor blemishes before they are downgraded to standard quality. This fish is being downgraded for black marks resulting from vaccination as a smolt. The fish graded as premiums go directly onto the scale to be size graded. The weight of the fish is recorded electronically as it passes over the scale, activating the appropriate arm to sweep it into the right bin for its size range. The fish are normally size graded in 2-pound increments such as 10 to 12 pounds, 12 to 14 pounds, etc. As you can see, automation plays a large role in modern fish processing. As the fish are directed into the lined boxes, they are arranged head to tail. It is important that the fish are laid straight in the boxes as they will undergo rigor mortis in several hours and stiffen in that position. As the boxes are filled, they are sent down the line for labeling and packaging. A label is printed for each box that must contain specific information such as species, the name of the producer, the grade, size, etc. This particular label is for a large tote containing 50 pieces weighing 752 pounds. The boxes of salmon are then topped up with ice before the lids go on. In the large totes, the fish are packed belly up in iced layers in addition to the top dressing of ice. Once the boxes have been iced, the lids go on and they are bound with plastic strapping to seal the lid in place. The finished boxes are stacked onto pallets and wrapped with plastic to prevent shifting of the boxes in transport. Ready to go, the pallets are loaded onto the refrigerated truck that will transport the fresh salmon overnight to distributors in Canada and the US in preparation for shipping throughout the US and Pacific Rim region. You have now had a chance to observe a typical example of the harvesting and processing of farmed salmon for market. Despite a small, highly restrained industry, BC is the fourth largest producer of farmed salmon in the world, making farmed salmon BC's #1 agricultural export.